So with that, I'm going to ask Jerry Ambrose, who is our finance director, to come forward, introduce the auditors. They'll make a presentation to you tonight. Thank you.
Thank you.
This is a chance to introduce a team that probably needs no introduction because Matt Moran has been with us for quite a few years, and they're here tonight to talk to you about, to review the results of the fiscal year currently ended. We received the full audit, I believe it was in late December, and we're going to go over that and answer your questions. I'd like to introduce the senior partner, Tab Huber, Pam Hill, senior audit manager, and Amanda Cronk over there making sure that everything works. And actually, Amanda deserves a lot of recognition because I'm told she does all the work. With that, I'll turn this over to Fran Moran. Thank you again.
Thank you very much, Jerry, and thank you, Council. What we've passed out to you is a PowerPoint presentation to summarize the results of last year's audit for the fiscal year ended June 30th, 2011. In terms of how the audit process proceeded, it proceeded as planned. We were able to submit the audit report in time for the December 31 deadline to the State Department of Treasury. In terms of the audit opinion on the CAFR, or Comprehensive Annual Financial Report, we issued an unqualified, or what's called a clean opinion, that basically indicated that those financial statements did represent the results of operations and financial position for the city for the last fiscal year, in accordance with GAAP, or Generally Accepted Accounting Principles. Here again, those numbers are the representations of management, and we as an audit firm express an opinion as to whether or not they're free from material mistake. And so, in that regard, those statements, in our opinion, were free from material mistake. We also, as a part of the audit, issued a letter to the emergency manager, the mayor, and also the city council to talk about the audit process itself, and also the report on internal control. We'll talk about some of those highlights from that letter in a second. There's also, as a part of the audit, there's also a federal grants audit called the single audit. That currently is in process, and we're anticipating that will be completed by the end of this month. And so that's coming down to the end here, and we're looking forward to issuing that report shortly. Okay, in terms of, as a part of that separate letter that we issued, there's a report on internal control that we issued. Our responsibility as auditors is to understand your internal controls and the major controls in place over your cycles of revenues, payables, expenditures, liabilities, all of those types of things. But the purpose of planning our audit, not to render an opinion on your internal controls. However, if there's anything that comes to our attention, then we're required to let you know that in terms of a written format, and that's really what that letter indicated, some of the material weaknesses and internal controls that we noted during the audit. Now, some of those are listed here. The first item was related to accrual adjustments. We made certain adjustments to various accounts that at year end that needed audit adjustments to be properly reflected in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles. And some of those areas were customer receivables, loans receivable, and deferred revenue, Michigan Tax Tribunal liability adjustments, interfund activity between fiduciary funds, long-term debt, accrued interest, and claims accrual. So all of those areas needed some accounting adjustments. And in part, I would say, in essence, those were year-end adjustments. They did not have an effect on the integrity of the monthly financial statements that you received from management. They were basically year-end audit adjustments. The next material weakness in internal control over financial reporting related to what we grouped into what's called account reconciliations. And so those are, the city has a general ledger, that summarizes all the activity. And then behind that general ledger, for certain accounts, there's a lot of supporting detail. And so one of the controls that needs to be in place throughout the year from an accounting standpoint is that there's periodic reconciliations between the details and the general ledger itself. And so one of the areas that we noted that as part of the audit that needed improvement was the bank reconciliations. During the year, last year that is, through the bank recs were behind about 6 months. At year end, they were caught up. And so our recommendation is to make sure that on a monthly basis, those bank reconciliations get done at least within 45 days after each month, so that you're adjusting the general ledger as necessary and making sure that any items are properly resolved. In terms of the water and sewer receivables, here again you have customer receivable details. The general ledger also summarizes those activities, and so there needs to be a reconciliation between that detail of the customer accounts to the general ledger summary accounts. That was done on an annual basis. Now, even though the reconciliation on the annual basis was only off an immaterial amount, we still feel there's enough transactions flowing in and out of those accounts on a daily basis that we think that reconciliation should be done at least on a monthly basis. There was one other reconciliation which talked about or dealt with a suspense account, which is like a temporary holding account where as revenue sources came in and sometimes the supporting detail behind that receipt wasn't known. For instance, if it was a miscellaneous revenue or something of that nature, that was parked in a temporary account until the supporting detail was known as to which fund it belonged to. And so over the year, those revenue sources accumulated in that one account, and at year end we needed to make an adjustment to recognize the revenue relative to those various revenue sources that initially weren't identified as to what the supporting what fund that related to. So here again, we like to see that reconciliation done on a more frequent basis than an annual basis. One other material weakness was related to the judgment levy that was related to the GM Towers. All the transactions really needed to be reported through a revenue and expense account through the general fund. The transactions were actually reported in a trust and agency fund, and that netted each other out. And so one of our adjustments was that needed to be reflected in your general fund budget, revenue and expenses. And so that was kind of a unique item, but it was a large adjustment that we needed to make. Okay, Pam, I think you're up.
Okay, I'm going to touch next on section 2 of the letter to the emergency manager, mayor, and council. That is the required communication under auditing standards number 114. So if you recall, at the beginning of the audit, we send out a letter to the council and the mayor discussing what the plan for the audit is going to be. This letter, the 114 letter, is the follow-up letter to that, and that explains the results of the audit and how the audit went. The majority of the wording in this is dictated by the standards, and so then we tweak it based on anything significant that we feel those charged with governance needs to be aware of. So it is our responsibility under the professional standards, really under the governmental auditing standards, to perform the audit. And as Tad said, we have to plan and perform the audit to obtain a reasonable assurance that the financial statements are free of material misstatement. There were some qualitative aspects of accounting practices. The first would be known that you do have, obviously, accounting policies. We are required to take a look at those policies and make suggestions if we do see areas that need to be improved. Those accounting policies are noted in Note 1 of your financial statements. There was one change in your accounting policies in the current year, which related to a new Governmental Accounting Standards Board pronouncement. It was GASB Statement number 54. And so that actually affected the way that fund balance classifications looked. And I will touch on that in a little bit more detail in one of the following slides. Next, we are required to report to you that there are certain estimates that are involved in the financial statements. And since there are some significant estimates, we are required to let you know what those are and then how those estimates are calculated. The first significant estimate would be the lawsuit claims payable. So that is obviously based on the city attorney and the other outside attorneys that are contracted, and based on a best guess as to what the outcome of the case is going to be at the time that we issue the financial statements. There's also an obligation, as Mr. Brown had mentioned earlier, the obligation related to pension and other post-employment benefits. That is obviously an estimate based on the actuarial's computation of future payouts for retirees. You also have an allowance for uncollectible receivables related to your water and sewer, and also related to your income taxes. And that estimate is based on collection history over the past several years. Another estimate is your pending tax tribunal cases and county chargebacks. That's based on past history and what cases are outstanding and pending at the end of the year, and what the history has been as far as how the cases have been settled. And lastly, you did have, related to Genesee Towers this year, you do have an asset that was recorded on the books as land held for resale related to Genesee Towers. The accounting standards would require that that is recorded on the lower cost or market. That was recorded based on market data and the most recent assessed value of that property. So those would be the significant estimates that were used in the preparation of your financial statements. Next, if we had any difficulties encountered during the audit, we would be required to let you know of those. We did not have any difficulties in performing the audit. Also, if we have any corrected or uncorrected misstatements, we are required to make you aware of those. Tad touched briefly on the corrected misstatements that we had related to those accrual adjustments and the Genesee Tower settlement. And we did have 2 minor uncorrected misstatements related to the bank reconciliations, which are attached to the back of your letter if you did want to take a look at those. And those amounts were not material, and the city did not post those entries as they were fixed in fiscal year 2012. Also, management has given us a letter with their representations that they made during the audit that was dated on December 19th, which is something that was required to do as part of the audit. Next, we talk a little bit about the fund deficits, which I know was mentioned earlier. As you can see on the slide, there are 5 funds of the city which had an either unrestricted or unassigned fund deficit at June 30th, 2011. The city has filed for an extension from the state to file these deficit elimination plans, and as of now, I believe it was extended through the end of March. Even though there are 5 funds that do have deficits, the state actually changed their requirements this year for filing a deficit elimination plan, and so the state only required that you file a deficit elimination plan for the general fund, water fund, and then the DDA. Next, Tad is going to touch a little bit on pooled cash.
Okay, well, as part of the deficit situation is also the amount of cash that the city has. And you can see in this table presentation over the last 5 years, you can see the balance of the pooled cash. Now, pooled cash is basically all the funds, in most cases, are pooled together from a cash management standpoint. And so in some situations, pooled cash, where it becomes in a negative or deficit position, actually means that that fund is particularly borrowing from another fund on a cash potential, specifically, generally, usually on a short-term basis. What we can see here with regard to general fund, it's been an ongoing matter. And so you can see that basically the general fund share of pooled cash at the end of June 30th, 2011, was in a negative $13.3 million position. So the recommendation here, and as a part of addressing the deficits, will be spending less so that the revenues will be greater than the expenditures and allow the cash flow to be restored back to a positive situation. Also, what helps in that situation is issuing a deficit bond that provides cash influx to the general fund as well, which I understand that that the city is considering over the next bit here. One other recommendation was, and this is just kind of a compliance item, on a quarterly basis, the investments of the city are supposed to be reported to those who are charged with governance, and our understanding was that report wasn't being done on a quarterly basis, so obviously our recommendation is that you comply with that. Even though we understand that the pooled cash doesn't really have any securities or investments that it's currently in, a report as to what type of account that is in and the amount of interest rate, if any, attached to it should be a part of that report. Okay? We're down to the stretch here.
Okay, I'm just going to touch briefly on what I had mentioned earlier with the new GASB 54 that was implemented in the current year. You will notice when you're looking at your governmental fund balance sheets, so for your general funds, special revenue funds, debt service funds, and capital project funds, that the classifications of fund balance now look a little bit different this year. What GASB 54 did was take the components of fund balance and break them out into 5 different components. The first one would be non-spendable. What that means is, for example, like a prepaid expense in which you've already spent the money, but the expense hasn't hit your general ledger yet. So that money is not available to be spent for something else. The next would be restricted, and restricted would be anything that's restricted by a legal authority, you know, let's say, for example, a federal grant revenue or something like that. Committed and assigned, at the end of the year, the city did not have any committed or assigned fund balance. However, in the future, as the fund balance does begin to grow, committed fund balance would be require a formal action by the city council to commit funds for something in the future. And then assigned management usually has the ability to be able to assign those funds for certain things. And then unassigned would be the amount that's available for everyday expenditures. So that is one difference that I'm sure you noted as you were looking through the financial statements. Lastly, Tad touched briefly on the single audit report, but we did want to just give you a quick update on the federal audit. The audit is required to be filed by March 31st. We are working very closely with the city to wrap up a few small open items that we do have. We did perform testing on 7 major federal programs this year. And in total, that was 93% of your total federal expenditures. So your total federal expenditures were about $18.9 million, and we've actually were required to test about $17.6 million of those this year. And of that $18.9 million of federal expenditures, about $10.9 were actually the ERA dollars, the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act dollars. So a lot of those, when those were issued, those were required to be spent within 3 years. So over the next year or so, we will see those ERA funds start to drop off. So I think that's it for our presentation. Does anyone have any questions for Tad or I?
I'm going to go around and ask each council person if they have a question. I'll start with Councilman Lloyd. None? Councilwoman Poplar? Councilman Nolan? Councilman Freeman? Councilman Lawler?
Good afternoon. I believe you said in your report that the sale of the Genesee Tower was not recorded in general funds. Where was it recorded if it was not recorded in general funds?
So originally, it was recorded in a trust and agency fund. So what happened was the cash came in on the tax bills, and that was recorded in a trust and agency fund. And then when it went out, the expense was, or basically, hold on, let me start over. The cash came in to a trust and agency fund, and a liability was set up because they knew they were gonna have to pay that back out for the claim. And so then when the claim was paid, the liability went away and the cash went out. So the piece that was missing was showing the revenue and then showing the expense.
Okay.
Does that
Yeah.
clarify?
Yes, and how much do you show recorded that was taken in?
I think it was 8 you know what, I have to look at the financial statements. It was 8.4 million, I think. Amanda's gonna look it up really quick.
Approximately 8.3 million.
8.3. I'll go ahead and yield to my other council members.
Councilman Neely?
Yes, thank you. Thank you for this audit report. I for one, was hoping that we would have much more detailed report before us, but I do have a few questions. Also in your presentation, you talked about the internal reconciliation of funds and different things of that nature, and also you talked about borrowing from other funds when you had a deficit in other funds. This report does not talk about, when we talk about borrowing, we have to repay to certain different funds, and I know there's been quite a bit of borrowing from funds such as the water and sewer fund, but this report does not talk about the reconciliation or internal reconciliation of repayment of those funds. Did you guys go over any of that?
Yeah, so in the financial statements, which I believe you got back in December, there is a footnote 3, I believe it is, that talks about pooled cash, and there's a schedule in there that shows every single fund and how much money they have borrowed from the pooled cash.
You say that is detailed in which report?
In the financial statement packet, it's the big bound packet that you got probably back in December, the audit report.
Mm-hmm.
If you do need another copy of that, we definitely have copies.
Okay, so on page 5, when we talk about fund deficits, are these actual amounts with the old funds? Are these actual amounts of each one of the particular funds that we talk about? Specifically, when we talk about the third one down, water supply division fund?
No, so these are actually cumulative fund balance or net asset deficits. They're not necessarily indicative of what has been borrowed from pooled cash. So this number is basically your assets minus your liabilities in the cumulative buildup of expenditures exceeding revenues over the years.
Okay, and I just want to piggyback on my colleague's question. When he talked about the Genesee Towers and we talked about the actual revenue collected, it was 8.3 million that you just said. What was the actual liability on it from the judgment?
I don't know if I have that.
It was 3.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I don't know if we have it in this. It should be. Yeah, you know, we could get back to you on that. It's actually included in a lump sum in one of the lines in the financial statement, so it's hard to identify exactly if they were dollar for dollar. I don't believe it was exactly to the penny what came in as to what was paid out, but we could definitely get that information and through management get that information to you.
Right. So my question would be if the actual amount that we collected from the residents as far as the tax assessment that was placed upon property, if there was a surplus from that, where would that revenue had went?
I don't believe there was a surplus, but without looking at the detail, unfortunately, we can't answer that.
Okay.
If there was a surplus, it would go back to the residents, but.
Yeah, but I don't believe that there was.
So you said something, you were off the mic, I couldn't hear you.
If there was a surplus, that would have to go back to the residents. But We'll double check to make sure before we answer, but pretty sure there wasn't.
So if that was true, if there is a surplus, it would go back to the residents. So if there's a sale of that particular building or that asset, that still would have to go back to the residents. Would that be?
No, I don't think so.
No.
The city owns that building now, and so if it ever is sold, that this proceeds would be retained by the city.
Okay.
Because it's a separate, the judgment is separate from the asset itself.
Yeah, the judgment levy was used to pay the actual claim on it, but not for the purchase of that property.
Okay. I reserve I'll pass it on to my colleagues, but I would actually like to see a more detailed report about the borrowing from all the other funds and if those funds are going to be made whole from the funds that borrowed the money.
Okay, yeah.
Councilman Wayhill? Councilman Sargentson?
No questions.
I just have a couple. Can't let you go without asking a couple, Ted. In the comprehensive audit book, when I went through it, I didn't see anything that listed a going concern for the city in this year's audit. Is that correct?
Well, typically, going concerns in a governmental arena aren't found. In other words, it's presumed that cities will continue and not go bankrupt and not go away and not exist at all. So unlike a commercial business that can go out of business and be eliminated, a city, it's felt that will continue in some fashion. So therefore, a going concern is not issued. However, certainly the deficits are listed, the cash flow deficits are listed, so that the reader can understand what the severity of that situation is.
But in years past, we've had going concerns listed in the audit, and this year I didn't see any, and I just wanted to make sure that that was correct.
I think that's a change in the philosophy as to going concern and whether or not it needs to be in the report itself.
Okay. Then another question. In the general fund, when the city took on a fiscal stabilization bond, we received $8 million. Was that booked in the general fund, or where was that booked at?
It was booked in the general fund, and so last year, I believe, the overall operating deficit of the city, including that $8 million that was brought in, was 7-point-some million. And so, in other words, the deficit actually decreased from 14.9 million, I believe it was last year, or the previous year, down to 8.8 million.
8.8 million this year.
The main reason for that was the deficit bond proceeds that got recognized as revenue in the general fund.
Okay. And then you said that deficit elimination plans could be submitted for other funds, similar to the motor pool fund or the building inspection safety fund. Those aren't listed as deficits in your audit, and I'm just wondering where those would have been listed at.
I believe if they made transfers, got rid of those.
Yeah, so there were, the only funds on slide 5, the only funds that ended in a deficit are the 5 listed on slide 5.
And that is because maybe we combined all those funds?
No, I believe what happened is the general fund made transfers into those funds to make them whole so that they were not showing a deficit.
So the general fund created a larger deficit
Correct.
by eliminating the deficits in the golf fund, the motor pool fund, the building safety inspection funds.
Building inspection fund, yes.
All those funds. So those funds were made whole through a transfer from a deficit general fund to actually increase that deficit in the general fund.
Correct.
Is that correct?
Yeah,
Yes.
the city's management's philosophy was to try to consolidate the deficits in a small number of funds.
Right.
So, general fund.
Not to have to write deficit reduction plans for all those funds, to have one large deficit and one deficit reduction plan in the general fund, basically.
But that's a very good point, that there were other funds that are operating in a deficit, and the general fund transferred monies to make it whole so that it wasn't showing here as a deficit amount.
Now, if those funds weren't made whole, would they have been shown as a listing on page 5 as funds with deficits?
Yes.
And is it my understanding that each one of those funds could have had a separate deficit elimination plan for each one of those funds?
Yes.
Correct?
Yep.
Okay. All right. You've answered all my questions, and thank you very much for the audit.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
We will get back to Councilman Neely through management on your few questions.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr.
Okay. Councilman Lloyd?
No, I just wanted to say that that I was hoping that this particular audit to us today would have obtained, or it would have included a lot more detail, a lot more numbers. So, you know, at a point in the future, I don't know if that's something that the city manager is considering, the auditors, but at some point, I would like to see those actual numbers. If you look at the deficits as relates to the general fund and all of that, okay, those are things that that we kind of knew and just brought the substance to it. But I mean, if I'm going to see, I can't comment on something that don't really have the detail in it. So I'm not being mean, I'm not being rude, but you know, I appreciate you all coming, but it didn't give me any information. I'm just being honest.
Okay. Thank you. All right, at this time, it gives me great pleasure to introduce the mayor to provide the State of the City address to the city. We're kind of under a little different circumstances than normal, Mayor, but thank you for being here and the opportunity to present the State of the City address to this community.
Thank you. Well, good evening. Thank you, Council President Kincaid. We know that we're gathered here tonight at a pivotal time for our community. We've been working hard to get a solid financial foundation in place, but we continue to face the tough challenges of turning around our economy, making our neighborhoods safe, and improving our quality of life. We did take a number of important positive steps forward this past year, despite some very difficult financial circumstances that you've just heard more details about. We have a record number of college and university students here. Michigan State University announced its medical school for Flint. General Motors added a third shift at the Flint Assembly. Our total employment rates are back to where they were before the recession, and city revenues were actually helped by higher income tax returns in fiscal year 2011 versus 2010. So I want to take a moment to applaud the leadership of our colleges and universities, United Auto Workers and General Motors, and all of our local and state and regional business leaders that are committed to help getting our community out of this recession and stagnant economy so that more people have access to good jobs and America maintains its lead in the world economy. So thank you to those leaders, a few of whom are here tonight. In terms of the economy and employment, we'll talk more about property taxes later. I see our forward progress in 2010 or 2012 being accelerated and sustained. The question is what will happen with reforms at the state level and whether this progress will actually translate into a stronger tax base. Over time, it could. On the other hand, the task in front of us with our neighborhood safety, our services, our quality of life is no doubt exceptionally difficult. It's bigger than any one person, one mayor, one manager, one governor, or even frankly, one president. However, I believe that the united force of our community is strong enough to tackle these challenges. I believe that about our community. I believe that much of what needs to be done to bring more jobs and more justice to our citizens and our community will come from the work of our community, our faith and our business leaders, and this is going to be the focus of my State of the City address this year. Emergency Manager Brown will be addressing the city's financial and operational challenges next month as part of the presentation of the annual budget. Gave some indications of where that's going here tonight. For people who have followed the city's finances, you know that the way forward to deal with our continued projected deficits is through a combination approach. We're going to have to reduce costs and employee compensation levels. We're going to have to ask residents to contribute back some of the revenues lost through property value drops and population decline. There's going to have to be additional fiscal stabilization bonding and other reforms that make sense for where our community is today. In the last 10 years, the city has lost approximately 20% of its population, and over that time, from 2002 to today, our property tax base is 30% of what it was, or 60% of what it was 20 years ago. We've lost over 30%. So the faster these necessary changes get made, the sooner the city of Flint can have this solid foundation underneath us for the future. In addition to these changes at City Hall, it's going to take a lot of people power to make progress. The Flint community needs each and every person to speak up, to step up, and really work towards a better future. There is still an important democratic process that's in place in our community, and those rights need to be protected. On one hand, if there are ballot questions that need approval of Flint's voters, to increase the income tax, to support public safety, to reduce the number of council members, to reduce the number of appointees allowed under the charter, I will be supporting those. I think we have a responsibility in our community to deal with the challenges that are coming to us in the ways that we can. But there are other concerns at the state level. Well, the Michigan Constitution defines the right of the people to repeal laws through referendum. The people have a right to have their say on Public Act 4. I do not support the state legislature passing a new law and circumventing their own legally established process for addressing local financial issues. When the signatures are verified, Public Act 4 deserves a vote. And it needs to be a real vote on the governing legislation that's in place. Meanwhile, we need to work in the best interest of our community. We need to work quickly, and we need to do that with maximum effect. But right now, we are simply not at full speed in our community. For all the good efforts underway, there are also too many people walking away from their own families and neighborhoods, too many people not cooperating with the police or the courts, too many youth not making it to school each day, too many people getting caught up in the drugs and the guns and the gangs and violence. And this lack of responsibility is undercutting other positive efforts that are scarring countless lives and families. I mean, we know that if we stay divided and fragmented, we'll fall into the same old problems over and over again. We know that if a house is divided, it can't stand. We're trying to rebuild a home here for people all across our community, and it's not enough for 9 or 8 out of every 10 people to be responsible. We need at least 98% in my estimation. We're not talking about income levels here. We're talking about responsibility and really the golden rule. What we know is that we need to act right towards each other. This is about right versus wrong. It's not about rich versus poor. We need at least 98% of our community doing what's right, or else we're going to continue to be weighed down by what feels like endless problems. This is what's happening every night with our police department and the overcrowding of the jail. I think we need to work as a united community to take responsibility for our families and our communities. I hope somebody in here agrees with me on that. There are inspiring examples of citizens who are volunteering every day to improve our community. There are positive partnerships that show how teamwork and trust can combine to get real transformation. With law enforcement, that always has to take a team approach. The Flint Police and the Michigan State Police are working very hard together. The governor's proposals are good. He acknowledges that we have to take a serious approach to crime prevention, including education and economic development and jobs. But it also takes our community. You'll be encouraged to know that our community partners and faith-based organizations continue to work on a weekly basis to move the ceasefire, now called the Lifelines Initiative, forward, to turn around lives so that we don't have to invoke the criminal justice system to keep our communities safe in those cases. We have more than 50 new Blue Badge volunteers that are going through training over these next coming weeks. Officer Meeks and Chief Locke and I met with that group as they got started last week. It was very encouraging to see more than 50 people, diverse in age and race, coming together to tackle this community's public safety challenges. Over the last few years, we've built up that core of volunteers who are trained, who are active through Blue Badge and Crime Watch and our block clubs. We probably have one active volunteer today for every police officer. I think we can do better than that. We need to have 3 or 4 or 5 active community volunteers for every police officer. We may not have the money that we used to, but we can get involved in making our own community, our own neighborhoods, our own families more safe. And the Flint Police Department is prepared to work with citizens to get that training and everything that they need to be effective. We need your time and we need your commitment to work with us in this. We've battled this public safety challenge for a long time. It's not just a budget fix, it's not just a proposal from the governor that's going to address this challenge. We have to do this together as a community. As we work together and we build trust with each other in our community, we have a community steering committee now working on the master planning process. We have to take a longer-term view to a number of the challenges that face our community. This is a good group. And now with the funding from President Obama's Sustainable Communities Office, the city now has a chief planning officer on staff, and the process is really starting to move forward. Now we know we can't wait for that plan to be completed, to work in our own neighborhoods and on economic development. There are already positive changes in every part of the city so that we see that we're connected, that we're one community, that we have access to jobs and to opportunities. The City of Flint and the city's Economic Development Corporation are working together to renovate the city's Oak Business Center. You can drive and take a look at those improvements on North Saginaw. It's now starting to look like a good place to start and grow your small business. The Genesee Regional Chamber of Commerce is now hosting staff from the Michigan Economic Development Corporation so that all of our economic development efforts are aligned. We need those investments from the Michigan Economic Development Corporation. We need those efforts to be expanded so that we have measurable impact on the job opportunities available to people here in the Flint community. We also need to see President Obama's proposals to attract industry and manufacturing and export companies to communities that have lost jobs and have seen factory closings. We need the support of the U.S. Congress so that we have the kind of support at the federal and state level that'll move our economy forward. Over time, we trust that this teamwork will transform our community, that'll turn our challenges into new assets. We have the city's student cabinet that's working with other student government leaders that are starting to figure out how to bridge the gap between our growing college population and our community. It was encouraging to meet with some of those students and to hear them say that they see themselves as part of the community, not just as college students. I think that's a good sign. It's something that we can build on because those students in our colleges and universities are a big part of our future, and we need to nurture that. We're also seeing small positive changes in some of our neighborhoods. I was reminded the other day about the work that the Carriagetown Mission has done, an organization that was often seen as creating concerns in the Carriage Town and near downtown neighborhood. It's now a positive force in the community, in addition to touching lives each and every night in a positive and compassionate way. Historic buildings are being renovated. Individuals who are coming to that center for assistance are spending time in the community cleaning up the streets and getting the trash out of the vacant lots. It's very commendable what they're doing there on a small neighborhood scale. We're also working to transform the assets that are left from that old industrial economy, the properties like Chevy in the Hole, where there's new cooperation between the city, the land bank, Kettering University, the Flint River Corridor Alliance, the Environmental Protection Agency, and the Forestry Service. This Arbor Day, you're going to see new trees planted along the Flint River and the old Chevy in the Hole properties. This will create a landscape that's brighter and that's greener and shows that we can take the assets from the old economy and make them something positive today. These sites, as they change, they also have to recognize their historical importance. And one of the things that I've called for is for the federal government to recognize the importance of the Great Sit-Down Strike. This is the 75th anniversary of the date or of the year when the now United Auto Workers won collective bargaining powers with General Motors and started the cascade of agreements across major American industry sectors, creating what we know as the 20th century great American middle class. I believe the federal government needs to recognize what happened at Chevrolet Avenue and the Flint River. It's an important part of our history, and if we keep working together, it's going to be an important part of our future as well. So we'll continue to work this year on all of our brownfield sites, Buick City, on the Delphi East property, so that we have jobs and development. Our overall economic development agenda will be to advance the master plan, to redevelop our brownfield sites, and to continue the diversification that you've seen in recent years as the education and medical and advanced manufacturing sectors have become a bigger and bigger part of our local economy. Trust, teamwork, transformation, when all of this comes together, it can really add up. And all of us in Flint can be better for it. Take a look at the recent highlight reel with Clarissa Shields, Flint's newest member of Team USA, who was on her way to compete in the Summer Olympics in London, right out of Flint's Burston Fieldhouse in FWC Burston. I guess the 5th and 6th Ward Council members are jealous that Burston's in the 3rd Ward. A great young woman and a good example of how hard work makes a positive difference. This year promises to bring changes. Difficult, but also positive. I believe that our community has the potential to flourish through better planning, through more cooperation, and unity. This process of change will have its costs, but the force of our united community is enough to get us through. And I, for one, am proud to call Flint home. I'm optimistic about 2012. I pledge personally to continue to work with all of you to turn around our economy, make our neighborhoods safe, and improve our overall quality of life in the ways that I can. And I ask that all of you in 2012 vote in all the upcoming elections, that you volunteer with one of our children and youth programs, that you participate in the master planning process so we can hear your ideas, and that you step up and do your part to make our neighborhoods safe. From my perspective, this is the state of our city. We're full of good potential, we're full of good people, and full of strength to keep moving. In God we trust. Thank you, and good night.
Thank you, Mayor. Now is the time set aside for public comment. I will call your name, ask you to come to the microphone. Limit your comments to 5 minutes and refrain from personal attacks on individuals or institutions. Yes. Huh? Okay. Okay, first to be called this evening is Sally Hayward Leonard. Sally?
I guess I'd like to start out with, oh, what tangled webs we weave when first we practice to deceive. I attended several of the neighborhood meetings, and a lot of the concerns were about lack of transparency in the opinion that this administration under Mr. Brown is nothing but smoke and mirrors. And I have to agree with a lot of that. I know that government protects government. Not too long ago, Mr. Brown approved a conflict of interest supplement in relationship to HUD and federal grants. Now, I've been around enough federal grants with the county and the city to know that this was most likely to address our recent problem with the energy grant. Because the Department of Energy doesn't want to look bad, Obama doesn't want to look bad, and the city of Flint doesn't want to look bad, so they kind of sweet talk it over. Now let's look at the recent substantial amendment to the consolidated plan. None of these conflicts of interest policy that Mr. Brown just put into effect are being covered. You have changes where, well, at one of the meetings at Haskell, Mr. Brown addressed a resident who discussed funding that was given to the Genesee County Regional Chamber of Commerce. Now, he allocated $30,000 to the chamber, and when I read the resolution, it looked like it was for services already rendered. Now, I may be wrong, but Scott, you remember this. The Attorney General versus City of Flint Council, on page 2, the Constitution of 1963, Article 11, Section 3 states, neither the legislature nor any political subdivision of the state shall grant or authorize extra compensation to any public officer, agent, or contractor after the service has been rendered or the contract entered into. Now, you know with federal funds, everything has to be bid. And in the substantial amendment, we also give another $15,000 to the Genesee County Regional Chamber of Commerce. And Mr. Brown justified this by saying it was $5,000 less than his $50,000 limit to the state. Well, just because he has control of the state, that doesn't mean he could break state laws on procurement or federal procurement laws. Now, many of you remember when James Rutherford was like an interim mayor recently. Well, when Mr. Kurtz came in, he kicked out every one of Mr. Rutherford's volunteers and pro bono employees. Now, we have a lot of pro bono employees, employees on loan, and they're taking administrative roles, but have they taken the oath of office? Are they entering into city contracts and obligations that should be covered by this oath of office? Are we indemnifying these individuals? I read the lawsuit and the city's response in the Smith Village construction and Smith Village development lawsuit, which nothing's happened in the last 2 months. I'm not sure what's going on. But the city's response was that Greg Eason, as city administrator, did not have the authority to bind the city. Yet are these individuals out there binding us into agreements? When I look at this and I see Mr. Dwayne Miller, he's either pro bono on contract or on loan. He's an executive director with the Genesee County Regional Chamber of Commerce. He's also a board member of Prima Civitas. We went and gave $15,000 to Local Initiative Support Corporation. Well, Sue Peters of LISC is on his advisory committee. She's also a consultant to the DCED. Now, how can you have a consultant to DCED, the same department that's allocating funds to this department?
Thank you, Sally. Our next speaker this evening is Ralph Diary. Ralph?
Good evening. My name is Ralph Diary. City Council. I got a problem, and it's Monday. The 3rd Ward, I think, encompasses Detroit and perhaps Crosby Street. Detroit and Crosby Street? Crosby.
Detroit
Crosby Street.
Is that in the 3rd Ward? Crosby
Is
Street.
that the 3rd Ward? Not sure. Well, we'll bypass that. Why don't we talk about Hurley Medical Center?
That's 5th Ward.
Thank you. And he's back. I would like to go on record to thank Mr. Senator Carl Levin for his cooperation in 1995 concerning Hurley Medical Center. I was honored to be selected to take the place of the good senator to interact with Health and Human Services concerning an assessment. It takes place every now and then, 5 years usually. The original closure determination of Hurley Medical Center was quite a surprise, and I didn't mind taking the senator's place. I had been selected by Patrick Wardell and was part of a small group, a team, and with their full cooperation, I had conducted for approximately 1 year assessments of executives for dispensation, the financial position of Hurley Medical as a going concern, a term that was used here this evening. When closure determinations are issued, there are 2 years that the institution has to wind down its business, and all of the affiliates associated with the medical center would have been severely impacted. There was a bit of a payment problem. The board issued a check, the request. The check was prepared. If any of you know or remember Carol Skowronski, a most influential woman, she took the check to the desk and presented it for signature by Mr. Daniel Caulfield. Mr. Daniel Caulfield refused to sign the check and cited some personal issues about himself. And I simply got up and left. Congratulations and kudos to Carol for trying to get my check signed by other members of staff, and it never happened. I realized that 1995 was a long time ago, and being under 4 federal criteria, the most of which would have been that the, not closure determination, but the revised determination would have never been put in the pipeline at HHS, I assume, Chicago, District 5. And I would have been, quote, convicted of being in conflict with the government of the United States, end of quote, if I had opened my mouth and said anything. Classified information, ma'am and gentlemen, is something that's very serious. Mr. Kincaid, congratulations on your new position. Gentlemen, the reason why I brought up word 3 is because, I'm sorry, the reason why I brought up the specific word, I guess I was wrong, was where I was raised. And I've been trying for the past 2 years to get paid.
Thank you. Our next speaker this evening is Chris Del Moroni. Chris?
Thank you. My name is Chris Del Moroni, and I live in Flint, Michigan. It is most disappointing that our community has been raped, robbed, cheated, stolen from, and otherwise misled. And I will go back several years. I'm referring to Water Street Pavilion, Auto World, Windmill Place, the Hyatt Regency. And now we find out, according to this report from the Emergency Financial Manager dated January 15th, 2013, I don't know why it says 2013, Financial and Operating Plan. Maybe there is a problem here. City of Flint, Office of Emergency Manager Michael K. Brown. And in this report, it says, in part, that the city relied upon transfers from the Water Supply and Sewer Disposal Fund for general city operations. Do you think that had anything to do with the raising of our water and sewer rates here in Flint, Michigan? I believe it did. It further says that city officials also borrowed from other funds to compensate for cash shortages, including the Public Improvement Fund, the Local Street Fund, and the Self-Insurance Fund. Do you think that has anything to do with why our roads are not getting repaired? Do you think that has anything to do with why we had to pay for the Genesee Towers settlement? Do you think if the city had not been borrowing from the self-insurance fund that maybe there would have been money there to pay for the towers, if not for all, for at least part? In our community, we're further being misled. We heard about Hurley Hospital, and they wanted a millage passed for our community, some bonding, because they wanted to do their emergency room and do other improvements there at the hospital. And guess what happened? They were able to make all those improvements without that extra money, and now they're making money. Our community is being misled day and day and day again. I went to 6 of the 9 financial manager meetings, and the theme in all those meetings, from what I could gather, was water, the water rates, the increases, crime, and problems with our streets. And what does Mr. Brown tell our community? There is no money. We cannot put more patrol officers on the street. We do not have the money. There's no money there for the streets. There's no money there for the streets. There's no money there for police and fire, but yet there's money there to give to the Regional Chamber of Commerce. Something's wrong here in our community. The Board of Education was passionate in passing a millage to improve our schools, and there is no doubt, there is no argument that our schools need improvement. We're talking about building improvements, new roofs, new windows, new carpeting, new tile, new bathrooms, all the new parking lots. All those improvements were needed. But what did they do? I went to the board meeting. I was on the facility planning committee, and we told them, don't do that. Don't go to the public. That's the last thing you want to do, is go to the public to ask for money. And what did they do? They went to the public, they asked for money. Now they're taking that money out of the pockets of the citizens through a millage increase to fix buildings, which they're now going to have to close. We're going to have buildings out there in our community with new roofs, new tile, new carpet, new bathrooms, and they will be closed, and the taxpayers of the city of Flint are going to have to be making payments on that. That's not fair. That's not right. We heard tonight we should expect more water rate increases. People that are going to propose that we increase the income tax. For what? So we can give more money to the chamber? You know, one of the travesties with the raising the water and sewer rates is not only is the rate increasing for the amount of water you use, but also for the service charge. And what that means is no matter how much you cut back on your water, you really can't reduce your rates that much because the service charge stays there. Okay? That's not right. We're being misled in this community. Can I say the Rutherford parking deck and the Downtown Development Authority? You saw tonight from Plant Moran what's going on with the Downtown Development Authority. I told you, don't get on the hook for that parking deck. And here we are. We're on the hook for the parking deck. It's a shame. It's a shame. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Our next speaker this evening is Mike Drake. Mike?
My name is Mike Drake. I'm a citizen of Flint. I can agree with a lot of what was just said. That's a hard act to follow. By all means, we're taking it time after time. The water rates, to my understanding, were supposed to be raised 67%, and somehow that equates from a $50 bill to $140. I don't understand how that is 67%. It sounds closer to 300%. And like you said, you know, the service charge, no matter if you cut your water off at the meter and don't use it all month, you're still paying $40 for what? Because they hooked it up 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, so we can donate more money to the general fund so it can be mismanaged again? Ridiculous. If you live in a neighborhood that has plenty of kids and a lot of concerned citizens, and we come to this council and we come to the police department and Chief Locke and Captain Johnson, and I know that we should have a task force for drug enforcement, because I'm pretty sure a large portion of the money that you guys are getting in your pockets and that this city's spending out of tax money is all drug money. Whether you like to believe it or not, there's almost more drug dealers that live in this city than there is concerned citizens. Now, you can watch TV and watch Detroit and all their SWAT teams go busting down doors and go taking all that drug money and bales of pounds of weed. Well, we got bales and pounds of heroin and crack cocaine right on University Drive that used to be called 3rd Street. So now we got a street named after the colleges that's littered with heroin addicts and needles the kids can't even play. We got a park in Rollingwood that's the same way. It has to be cleaned up every morning. And we were told if we kept that park cleaned up, we'd get some money for it. Well, that never happened, but the park's still clean. We go up and board up the houses, the boards get tore back off, now they're drug dealers living in it again. We tell the police, you know, these guys got surveillance systems, they got the scanner on their phone. The neighbors hear them, I'm on the scanner, I gotta run home. The cops don't ever go to their house, they got AK-47s on their kitchen tables, they got drug surveillance cameras outside their house, they got drugs in the house, they're dealing it all over the street, right next to Johnson School, or what used to be a school. That's the newest school in the system that's been closed down. So that's not, you know, I know you said that we're going to have new tile and new carpet in schools that's closed down, but we got a brand new school that's closed down, damn near. That's the least of our problems is the water. You know, in Burton they pay, I think it's 100 or 150 every 3 months, and maybe even a little less than that, but they get the water from the same place. Scrappers at Lowell, right now as we're sitting here having this meeting, there's scrappers in Lowell School stealing from the city. There's no cops that's going to show up. No one's going to go in that building and put handcuffs on them. Nothing's going to happen. And the reason I know that is because right on the way to this meeting, I was taking pictures of this devastated city, and I stopped by that school with my daughter and my old lady, and we watched them running through the corridors of the hallways from the back side of the building that's all ripped off, and watched them throwing the pipes out the back. The cops don't care. And if they did care, they'd be out there. If they're making money off of busting these drug houses, because you know the dope dealers are sitting on stacks of it, and look at the people that are in these drug rehabbing facilities around here. Look at the people that are out there begging for money so they can go get their next fix, because they're going into bad withdrawals because they ain't got their crack, they ain't got their heroin, they ain't got their alcohol. That's what we're feeding them. And then we're going to charge them for water, too. We're building houses. That's awesome. What about the ones on the east side that are all burnt down, that ain't had the basements pushed in? You been down Franklin lately? There's basements of buildings, the old Ben Franklin. I'm sitting there with an open basement waiting for some kid to lose an eye or an arm or his life, maybe. God, where could I go with it all? Cameras. Are drug cameras available for the citizens to pay for? I noticed you got one over there off of Elmridge, but you set it right on the corner in the spot they don't deal the dope. Now they're all up and down Elmridge and Cecil and all the other streets. We know where the drug dealers are, don't get me wrong, we just don't go get them. We could go get their supply and keep the poison out of our youth and keep the heroin and the crack out of them, but we choose not to because the city cops are busy doing what again? Taking guns from innocent civilians as myself. I've had a group of gentlemen pull a gun on me. I shot one shot in the air. I was taken downtown for a driving citation. It was an old existing citation, but what they've chosen to do is keep both my weapons and will not return them to me. And so I called the senator's office. He said I had a disorderly ticket from that night. No, there was no ticket issued that night, but yet my guns have been unreturned. And I have several neighbors with the same story. So we try to defend ourselves, and we ourselves are prosecuted. It cost me money to buy weapons to defend my family, and once I had to use them and defend myself, I was criticized, called a vigilante, and my guns were taken from me and told I was a dangerous man. The dangerous ones are the ones out there with the AK-47s, with the crack, with the heroin, and the dope houses that we know where they're at. And so we've got information, we've got plate numbers, and I encourage every citizen to take down a plate number, take down a dope dealer's address, and you get on to Fed Up in Flint on Facebook. It's a new page we're starting for aggressive enforcement from citizens. We're going to start marching these houses, and we're going to call the news networks. I don't care how big it goes, I really don't, as long as it makes a difference. But we're going to gather people, parishes, we're going to gather congregations and everybody, and we're going to go door to door and march on these dope houses. If the cops won't do it, us citizens have to. Fed Up and Flint on Facebook.
Thank you, Mike. Our next speaker this evening is Shirley Taylor. Shirley?
Good afternoon, brothers and sisters.
Good afternoon, Shirley.
Ms. Taylor. I stopped coming to City Council because we talk about the same things. Let's get something done. God bless America. God bless America. We need to know, politicians, that the government is made by the people, for the people, and of the people. It's a wonderful thing to be a servant, because that means people trust you enough to get out and vote for you. Get out and vote for you. You want the job, we get out and vote for you. And as far as the schools, it is a forest. The Michigan schools. These children might forget a book, might have to go to the bathroom. If you're caught in the hall, your name is wrote down, and I'm talking about McKinley. My grandson, when my daughter died, their father was already dead. I took guardianship of my grandchildren. Over at Pierce, no problems. Kylan was playing the saxophone. They did concerts. They went on trips. They did musicals. It's always something to do over in that area for young people. The Michigan school systems look as if they don't care about these kids. Half these teachers on drugs, prostitution, pedophiles. And I know this. I used to work in the school system. You know this. You used to work in the school system. These people don't care whether these kids learn or not. The library's there. It's open Saturdays and Sundays. Don't kick these kids out of school. You kick them out of school, they might be mentally challenged to begin with. 1 out of every 110 children has some kind of deficiency. They want to act as if every person is a square peg. You put that square peg in this. Some of them might be round, some of them might be octagon. Everybody's not alike. Everybody has a different personality. Some children learn faster than others. Do not kick these children out of school. Even if your parent have to go to the library with you on the weekend, give them an assignment, because you kick them out of school, the second time they're behind, the third time they're even further behind, third or fourth time, they've given up. They quit school. They have anger built up in their hearts. And then they're going to turn to the streets. Well, I'm going to get mine. The next thing you know, they have a gun in their pocket. Education will never fade. Keep your children covered under the blood of Jesus and keep them in school.
Thank you, Shirley. Our next speaker this evening is Art Diamond. Art.
Good evening.
Good evening.
After attending a few of these city council meetings, I've come to the conclusion it's a nice place for those who need to vent, their frustrations and what have you, but merely nothing more I ever see happens. I mean, we go through this monthly after month after month. It's the same questions, and it's I don't know how it can be corrected. Many good questions are addressed by the concerned citizens of Flint. Few are answered, usually a canned response at best. That leads me to believe either a forthright, honest, and complete answer cannot be given, or there's no correct answer. I mean, there's just no answer to some of these questions that are that easy for you to, to say outright. We have huge issues in Flint. I mean, they include crime, high water rates, no city funds, education, and unemployment. Unemployment will never change as long as these other problems exist. What major company is going to invest in a broke, crime-ridden, undereducated city with huge utility costs? I mean, I've heard talk about, well, this company's going to come in because we're going to have this new water pipeline. Who's going to pay for that water? They're going to go somewhere else where it's a third the cost. So we as concerned citizens need to put our petty differences aside, and we all have some, and form a coalition to correct these problems. The city has proven it is incapable, not necessarily unwilling or unwanting, but without the funds to do so. So anybody interested in actually making some changes in the city, get with Mike or myself after the meeting, and we'd be glad to go over what few ideas we have, and maybe we can, as a group, together in this whole city, we can go make some changes. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Art. Our next speaker is Mr. Eric Mays.
Yeah, my name is Eric Mays, and the theme has pretty much been set. I mean, I'm a true believer. I believe the Lord moves in mysterious ways, and the previous speakers and what's been said tonight has set it up for what I had thought about talking to you guys about before I even got here. I'm not going to look up too much at you guys. I know who the city council is. Know which ones I call and talk to privately, and I know which ones I don't. I don't talk to you privately, Scott, but we can talk whenever I need to. I don't talk to Wade Hill privately. I figure he's approachable. Jackie, I don't talk to you privately, but when we pass, we're cordial, and you know, you like my mother better than you do me. But Del Rico and BB and Josh and Sargentson and Neely and Lawler, I pick up the phone and call and talk to when I want. I say this because I'm trying to make a point. That was a good article you had in the Courier this week, Councilman Lawler, about the taxes, but the article up under it says, time for Flint to catch up. I'm gonna encourage each one of y'all to read that article, because I went to 5 of the 9 forums with the emergency manager. I've been in council meeting for years, and these people is right. Read this article, because we get tired of coming to meetings and the big timers, the elected officials, the clergy, the media. I mean, they think we don't have ideas. They think that the people can't help fix the city. Look at what the mayor did. The mayor talked about the people, but when it came time to hear from the people, he's gone. My point is this. We ain't stupid. I'm a Michigan State graduate. I've got degrees. I was all A's and 1B. When we come to meetings to communicate with our elected leaders, we really wish, since the charter can be threw out now, since nobody cares if this council meet on their own, forget the 7,000, call a meeting. The charter ain't meaning that now. 5 or 6 of y'all call a community meeting and y'all just sit and listen for a while. Have the police there. If you think ignorant people gonna get up and they're not germane, just politely have them move to the side. We need dialogue with our leaders. And we need feedback from our leaders, because we don't need to come to meetings, disseminate information, ask questions, and y'all look at us like stone-faced. It's getting a little ridiculous. I called BB, I think I talked to, BB is Nolan, for y'all don't know. I think I talked to Neely, and I said to them guys, Scott, listen to this. Jackie, Wade Hill, listen to this. I said that I would wish the city of Flint would cut my water off when the bill hit a month or $100 late. Because what they doing, they wait until it hit 7 or 8 months late, and now my water bill ain't $20 and $30 no more, it's $112 a month. It's easier for me to come up with $100 and cut it back on. It's been off for a month and a half. I can't come up with $875. Remember, I'm the one telling you, I'm gonna get a pension from GM next year. But I'm the advocate who ain't scared to put my business in the street. I was the only legitimate mayoral candidate, probably with a bridge card. The point is this, you got 2 classes of people. Y'all in the class of the bourgeoisie right now. You in the class with a cash flow with money flowing. We over here in a class, we got sense, but we don't have cash benefits. We can't buy soap. We can't put our clothes in the dry cleaners. We can't even pay our water bills. We would be glad to get 50 to 100 a week. And everywhere I go, they say the solution to crime is jobs. We're advocating things we can do to make $100 a week, and guess what? The leadership meets and leave because they got a cash flow. The haves and the have-nots. I'm going to be the advocate for the have-nots. We can help you help us, but you got to take us serious and listen to us. Provide leadership. I dare y'all, individually or collectively, to meet and talk and brainstorm. When we come out the meeting, we will have solutions. Let's stop this. Read this article about how to effectively have a meeting with the little people.
Thank you,
God
Eric.
bless.
Thank you, Eric. Our next and last speaker this evening is Doris Jones. Doris?
Thank you, Council. My name is Doris Jones, and I want to congratulate Eric Mays for his bravery and his ability to bring out the issues and the problems that this town has. And that's why I'm here today. I'm here today because I was made aware of a group or a team that this financial manager talked about. It's supposed to be a team of people that's working on the safety in our town. But when I went to check on it, because they never called me back, they said this was only a 45-day report that he had to make. And so what did he do? He included it in there, but the initiation of the plan is not going to happen. But I'm wondering, is there anything you all can do? What can you do? Are you powerless? Can you say anything? Can you do anything about even the monies that the governor plans to send to our town to help out with crime? I know they're going to open the jail, but we need to work on the safety of the community this summer. We need to work on it. And I know you guys have talked about the budget, you talked about the finances, and that's over and done with. You talked about it. There's no way you can stop them from embezzling money, from doing a switcheroo with the money. So let's go to the next page. We have our children that we need to work with, and we have age groups that we can work with. We have a curfew that we need to enforce. And I know somebody said we can't do that, we don't have the manpower. But I seen the financial manager go get him some manpower. He went and hired these people, and they're getting paid this salary. But the funds and the money for the protection and the safety of the community has yet been put on the back burner. We need to, if you can do anything except sit here and come here, we need for you to work on working with our young people this summer. It's not too late. Okay, we still have time. And you know what? Every time you have a meeting, I'm going to be here. I'm going to be like that bad rash, because I'm going to be on you. Because I don't like the fact that you guys can come here and talk only about money that pertains to something that somebody's made up, when the real issue, the real problem is not addressed. We have our gun buyback. That could be a possibility. We also can have something where we could buy information from our young people. Let them tell us who's carrying a gun, who plans to hurt somebody. We can do these things. It's not impossible. I've seen other communities work on ridding their young people of guns and to clean out of their community. So my hope, and the reason why I'm here, is that you listen and you put together something and you stop tabling everything. Let's do something. Let's stop talking about it and be about it.
Thank you. Okay, that concludes our speakers for this evening. Our
hey,
next,
Scotty, hold up.
No, RL.
You said it's the last speaker. I put my slip in back there.
RL, you didn't put a slip in. I'm sorry.
You ain't sorry. I put a slip in back there. I came
RL,
in.
I didn't have a slip. I'm sorry.
Well, I just told you it's in there.
It's
in my.
RL, I'm not going to argue with you. I don't have your slip.
Hey.
Thank you. Thank you.
I'm gonna speak.
No, you're not. I don't have a slip for you. You're not going to speak. This isn't our council meeting. You have to have a slip in order to speak.
Will somebody go back there and get my slip out of that box?
Well, it's too late. The next emergency manager meeting with the Flint City Council will be on Monday, April the 12th at 5:30. We are adjourned.
Oh, excuse me, hold on. Hold on. Mr. Kincaid.
April 9th, I'm sorry. April 9th.
Do I need a speaker slip to speak?
Well, you know, Councilman Neely,
Well, you can excuse yourself, but I am going to address, I don't have an agenda.
Well, the agenda says to adjourn, so that's why I'm adjourning. That's the only reason why I'm adjourning.
I didn't get a copy of an agenda. I don't know of any agenda, but this is still the city council meeting. I don't care if it's ordained by the emergency manager or not, but.
Councilman, and I don't disagree with you, but if you read this agenda, it says the emergency manager's meeting.
Well, what I'm going to do, Scott, is I'm going to speak anyway.
You can.
I will.
Okay, but the rest of us, we are adjourned.
The rest of you can leave.
Thank you.
But I do want to address the public today, and I want to applaud you for staying here through this meeting. I don't believe that a city council that's elected by the residents of the city of Flint should be neutered or sanctioned about speaking. I was not elected to come to a meeting, to sit in the seat, to watch the individual speak, and not to be able to address the crowd and the concerns of the residents that elected me. I thought I was offended, and I'm still offended by some of my colleagues that walk off even though I said I wanted to speak. But all of the appointees of the emergency manager left the meeting before the crowd had an opportunity to address them about some of the concerns and issues. They bring a financial report that was quite anemic to explain what's going on. But this is about power and control. This right here was about power and control today. They're in power and they're going to control the residents of the city of Flint. And it's about taking the power back. Taking the power back that belongs to the people. Now, we talked about the financial issues in the city of Flint. Had Mike Brown stayed here today, I would have asked him the questions about the revenue streams, generating additional revenue streams. First, he should probably ask the appointees that he brought in making high salaries to probably pay the same amount of income tax that we pay in the city of Flint, because they don't live here. They take high salaries out of the community that's paid by these residents in the city of Flint. The mayor got here, he spoke. The hypocrisy in which he spoke with was toxic. He cited me and my colleague here for not clapping when he talked about Clarissa Shields, and we support Clarissa Shields. But he didn't talk about the fact that no money was ever allocated to Burston Field Center for any of the equipment that she trained on. She made it, but will the next child make it? Now, what we need to do is, what the people need to do is stand up. Stand up and fight for your rights. Don't allow this to happen. Don't allow this show. This was a show today, because anytime that you can have all the emergency managers appointees leave before you have an opportunity to address them, is a show. They don't care about you. Make them care. My colleagues that sit in that presidency seat, I didn't receive an agenda, and I will never let them dictate to me whether I can address the residents who elected me or not. I have a duty and a responsibility which was given to me by you. Don't allow this to stand. The power has never left the bosom of the people. Stand up and fight for your rights. Fight for your rights. Thank you.
Yeah, but they play with the clocks, turn the clock real fast. And then, hold on a second, don't. Speed up.